A woman called Sarah brought a furry creature to a pet groomer. She told the groomer, called James, that it was a dog and needed to be groomed. James, not suspecting anything, took the creature and began to groom it. As he was cutting the creature's fur, he was shocked to discover that it was not a dog at all. The groomer turned pale and asked the woman, "Is this what I think it is?" Instead, it was a rare and exotic animal that the woman had found in the forest. Sarah had disguised it as a dog so that she could take it to the groomer without attracting attention. James was amazed by the creature and asked Sarah where she had found it. But James didn't expect this answer. Sarah had always loved exploring the forest that surrounded her small village. She had lived there her entire life, and she knew every inch of the dense, tangled wilderness like the back of her hand. But today, she decided to take a new route that would lead to her discovery of the dog. Despite her extensive knowledge of the forest, Sarah was always on the lookout for new and interesting creatures to discover. She had a particular love for animals, and she spent much of her time studying them and learning about their habits and behaviors. After walking this new route, Sarah came across a small cave hidden among the trees. It was a place she had never noticed before, and it seemed to call out to her with a sense of mystery and adventure. She simply had this odd feeling that she should check inside it, so she did. Without hesitation, Sarah made her way into the cave, her curiosity piqued by the unknown. She had always loved to explore and discover new things, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity. She was just moments away when she encountered something very unusual. As Sarah made her way deeper into the cave, she began to feel a sense of unease wash over her. The air was cool and musty, and the darkness seemed to press in on her from all sides. But despite her growing sense of dread, Sarah refused to turn back. She was determined to see what lay at the heart of the cave. As she pushed on, Sarah finally came to a large chamber at the center of the cave. She was quite overwhelmed by the idea that this cave would be this big. She had never been into a cave like this, so it quite impressed her. But not much later, this feeling would turn into fear. When Sarah walked further, she suddenly stumbled upon this strange and peculiar-looking animal, and she was immediately intrigued. The creature had a long, snout-like nose, a shaggy fur coat, and large, floppy ears that seemed to flop about in every direction. It was unlike any animal Sarah had ever seen before, and she knew that she had to get a closer look. Despite the creature's creepy eyes, Sarah could see that it was friendly and harmless when getting closer, and she felt a sudden surge of affection for the animal. She knew that she had to help it, but how? It seemed like a harmless dog, but she wasn't sure of it, and she hoped that she wasn't in danger here. As she approached the animal, Sarah could see that it was covered in dirt and mud, and its fur was matted and tangled. It seemed to be in need of some help, and Sarah knew that she had to do something to help it. Gently and carefully, Sarah scooped the animal up in her arms and carried it back to her home. The animal was not afraid, and allowed Sarah to pick it up with ease. Sarah walked out of the cave, but as soon as the dog came into the sunlight, something strange happened. Panicked by the sunlight, the helpless animal jumped out of Sarah's arms and ran very fast back into the cave. Sarah didn't think twice before running after the animal. She soon became aware that it had stopped and was hiding in a corner. She gently picked it up and slowly went back outside, step by step, so that little by little the pitiful creature would get used to the sunlight. Fortunately, the animal eventually adapted to the sunlight. Now that Sarah could see the animal even better, she was genuinely unsure of whether it was a dog or not. She had a strong suspicion while she was in the cave, but now that she is outside, she seriously doubts that. She ultimately makes the choice to bring it home. As she walked through the village with the creature in tow, people stopped and stared in amazement at the strange-looking creature. Some even asked her if it was a dog, but Sarah just smiled and shrugged her shoulders, not wanting to give away the animal's true identity. Sarah didn't even know this. When Sarah arrived at her home, she carefully placed the animal on a soft blanket and set to work grooming it. She spent hours carefully combing out its fur and washing away the dirt and mud that covered its body. As she worked, the animal began to look more and more like the beautiful and exotic creature that it truly was. Finally, after several hours of grooming, Sarah was finished, and the animal looked absolutely stunning. Its fur was soft and shiny, and it had a look of contentment on its face that Sarah had never seen before. She quickly grabbed her laptop to find out what kind of animal she had taken to her home. She opened her laptop and began frantically looking for pictures of animals that looked like the one she had found. She searched for several hours without yielding any results, so she had to use another method to determine what kind of animal this is. Sarah knew that she had to find a way to show the world this amazing and rare creature that she had discovered in the forest, so she decided to take it to a local dog groomer and see what they would make of it. She searched for dog groomers on the internet and called the one nearby. Sarah quickly got into the car and rushed to the dog groomer. She noticed that very busy on the way, but this did not make her stop as she quickly made all those cars catch up. She was just too excited about what this beautiful animal could be. As Sarah walked into the groomer's shop with the animal in tow, the groomers were absolutely amazed by the creature's beauty and unique appearance. They had never seen anything like it before, and they were eager to learn more about it. After much questioning and investigation, the groomers finally realized that the animal was not a dog at all. Sarah could tell by the dog groomer's look that something was wrong, and when he looked at Sarah, Sarah knew that something was wrong. As they began to question Sarah about the animal, they began to suspect that it was something more than just a strange-looking dog. They called the police, and before long, a team of officers arrived on the scene. The police were just as amazed by the creature as the groomers had been, and they quickly began to investigate. They ran tests and consulted with experts, trying to determine the animal's true identity. Sarah somehow felt sorry for the little animal that the police were doing all the testing on him. As she waited in the shop for the creature to be groomed, Sarah heard a loud noise and turned to see the creature escaping through an open window. She immediately realized that something was wrong and that the creature was in danger. Determined to help the animal, Sarah set out to find it. Sarah was hoping that the police would assist her in the search, but when she approached the officers, they refused to provide any information or assistance, and Sarah was left on her own to track down the creature. Sarah returned to the forest and searched for hours, following tracks and scanning the trees for any sign of the creature. Sarah felt helpless, as she couldn't find any trace of the creature. She assumed it would be completely in fear after the police ran all these tests on him. As the sun began to set, Sarah started to lose hope. She had been searching for so long, and she still hadn't found any sign of the creature. She was about to turn back and go home when she heard a faint rustling in the bushes. She froze, listening intently, and then she saw a flash of movement out of the corner of her eye. Sarah's heart raced as she followed the movement, carefully making her way through the underbrush. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Sarah saw the creature huddled in a small clearing with a litter of newborn babies. She knew that the police would probably find the animal and its babies, and she couldn't bear the thought of them being taken away or harmed. So she made the difficult decision to take the creature and its babies back to her home, where she could protect them from harm by the police. Once Sarah arrived home, she saw that several police officers were standing in front of her house. She thought this was very crazy, but she had to find a way to get the little creatures into her house. After some thinking, she came up with the perfect idea. Sarah decided to park her car some distance away and walk to the back of the garden. There were no police officers there, so she could enter through the back door. Eventually, Sarah managed to get into her house unseen, but this was only short-term. At first, everything seemed to be going well. Sarah worked tirelessly to feed and care for the creatures, and they soon began to thrive under her care. But as it became night, they were more active. They started to make more and more noise. Sarah didn't know what to do because the officers were still in front of her house. Then Sarah heard a knock at the door. "Oh no," she thought. She opened it to find a group of police officers standing outside. They told her that they had received a report of loud noises coming from her house, and they needed to come in and investigate the noise. Sarah tried to hold them off, but the officers were determined to enter the house. They pushed past her and went inside, where they were shocked to see the multiple creatures that Sarah had been hiding in her home. Sarah knew that she would be in problems now. Sarah was shocked and confused and didn't know what to do. She tried to protest, but the officers were insistent, and they escorted her out of her house and into a police car. As she walked to the police car, she looked over her shoulder and almost cried at what she saw. Sarah saw multiple police officers aggressively grabbing the creatures. It was just without any mercy, and Sarah just couldn't understand why the police were cruel to those tiny creatures. It was so sad to see. As they drove to the police station, Sarah's mind raced. She thought of all the different scenarios those creatures would be put in. However, her own situation also didn't look that great. She nearly forgot that she was being arrested. Will she end up in jail? Everyone appeared to know the situation once Sarah got to the police station. Everyone appeared to be very angry with her, as she could clearly see the disgust on everyone's faces as they all behaved as if she was some sort of criminal. Sarah was then immediately put into an interrogation room. She sat there for what seemed like hours, wondering what was going to happen next. Finally, a police detective entered the room and began to question her. Sarah refused to answer any of the detective's questions and instead demanded to see her lawyer. The police detective began to employ an aggressive technique with which she thought she could pressure Sarah. Sarah thought it was crazy that she was really being treated like this, but she knew she had to be careful here. Everything she says may be used against her. Sarah felt scared by the idea that she could be in back trouble and maybe could be thrown into jail. The detective tried to intimidate Sarah, but she remained calm and refused to speak. She knew that she had the right to remain silent and she wasn't going to say anything until she had legal representation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sarah's lawyer arrived, and Sarah hoped that this interrogation horror would soon come to an end. With her lawyer by her side, Sarah explained the entire situation, and after a while had the perfect approach and said, "Let me do the talking." The lawyer calmed Sarah down and promised her that she won't end up in jail. He said that she didn't do anything wrong there. Sarah didn't break any law. The police just want to frighten Sarah to get some information out of her. Then the lawyer called the police detectives back into the room. Police officers came back in, and the lawyer did all the talking. After a while, the police officers agreed with him and couldn't keep her in the police station. Sarah felt much relieved that she was finally able to go, but she still wanted to know what kind of creature she had found and what was going to happen to them. Sarah tried to explain that she only wanted to help the creatures, and she really wanted to help them, and don't let them end up being these experimental animals. "That's animal abuse," she said. Then the officers looked at her and said, "Okay, we're going to tell you. However, first, she needs to sign a secret contract that she won't tell anyone about it." Sarah agreed to this condition, and the police detectives handed over the contract, and Sarah immediately signed the entire document. The officers were about to tell when suddenly an officer came in and said that one of the little creatures was not doing well. The agents got up right away, and seeing that Sarah was allowed to know everything, she was allowed to come with the agents. As they were walking, the agent indicated that it was about a very special breed of dog that occurred in prehistoric mankind. That's why it was so special that it still existed, because they had been looking for it for decades. Sarah already had a feeling that it was a very special breed. Once arrived at the room, Sarah finally saw the tiny creatures again. One of the officers said it was a false alarm, and luckily they are all doing well. They are all healthy, as is the adult mother. Sarah didn't really dare ask, but she did anyway. "Can I take them home?" In the end, Sarah was released and allowed to keep the creatures on the condition that she find new homes for them as soon as possible. She was grateful to be able to keep the animals that she loved so much, and she worked hard to find them all new homes where they would be well cared for and loved.